Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Susan Hawthorne. I'm one of the publishers at Spinifex Press. Just like to begin with a welcome to country. We respectfully acknowledge the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their relationship and custodianship of the lands and waterways. The countries on which the Spinifex offices are situated are Jiru, Bunurong and Wurundjeri, Wadawurrung, Bundungara and Noongar. We also acknowledge the many women throughout history who have fought for women's freedom and the freedom of lesbians, often at the cost of their lives. I just want to begin by saying that this is the 8th book that we've published by Vandana, only one of which we've lost the rights to. And this book is being published, as have the previous ones, being published with Women Unlimited in India, another independent feminist press of long standing. And their edition will be published in a week or two. Ritu told me it depends on the rain and how much rain there is. So I'm now just going to do some brief introductions so you know who's here this evening. So first of all, book by Vandana Shiva. Vandana is a physicist. She's a world-renowned environmental thinker and activist for economic, food and women's justice. She is a leader of the Slow Food Movement, director of Navdanya and of the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology, and a tireless crusader for farmers, peasants and women's rights. Vandana is the author and editor of a huge number of influential books, including Staying Alive, Soil Not Oil, Making Peace with the Earth, Oneness, with her son Kartikeya, and she's the editor of Seed Sovereignty and Food Security. And a couple of years ago, she published her autobiography, which is called Terra Viva. And as well as that, she's won a whole stack of prizes, internationally speaking, the Yoko Ono Grant for Peace in 2008, Sydney Peace Prize in 2010, and the Calgary Peace Prize in Canada in 2011, and many others. She's been a board member of the World Futures Council and one of the leaders of the International Forum on Globalization. So it's great to have you here, Vandana, speaking as part of our launch. And we hope there are many more like this. Ariel Salleh is the woman being the launcher tonight. Ariel is currently Distinguished Visiting Scholar in the Centre on Labour, Sustainability and Global Production, as well as the Queen at the Queen Mary University of London. She's also Visiting Professor, Faculty of Humanities, Nelson Mandela University, South Africa. I've known, like Vandana, I've known Ariel for a very long time, and she has written across areas such as political ecology, in which she emphasizes the centrality of reproductive or regenerative labor in the world system, and by restoring value to local everyday caregiving skills and Indigenous knowledges. Ariel re-examines social justice and sustainability questions like climate change and neoliberal green economics. Her theoretical work draws on lots of activist experience in anti-nuclear politics, biodiversity protection, support for Asia-Pacific women, and much, much more. Her books include Ecofeminism and Politics, which was the first one that I came across, and also this one, Eco-Sufficiency and Global Justice, which was published in 2009. There are also a lot of articles in journals and anthologies, and her work's been translated into numerous languages. So I think the last thing is that she's an associate professor in social inquiry at the University of Western Sydney for a number of years. So over to you, Ariel.
and greetings, friends. It's wonderful to catch up again. Well, this book, The Nature of Nature, is vintage Shiva. And I have to say, halfway through the book, I thought, my God, I'm going to buy a dozen copies of this for friends, family, activists, colleagues. And it's useful also as a teaching device because it's a transdisciplinary argument that she was making, and there I see four layers of analysis woven together in this book in a very spontaneous and free flowing way. Nevertheless, so just to pick out these arguments, the book introduces the geopolitics of global neoliberal capital. It exposes the reductionist methodology of Eurocentric science. It unpacks the health and ecological costs of so-called progress. And it explains the true logic of nature, which is relational. I'll say a little bit about a couple of these before throwing it over to Vandana to comment. Geopolitics. Well, this story, of course, begins with the 20th century corporate capture of social democratic governments and what flows from that. To move on, most people are familiar with those political economic processes. Scientific method. Well, for 5 decades now, ecofeminist thinkers like Vandana and myself and others have been deconstructing the instrumentalism of Western science. And this self-styled scientific enlightenment led by Sir Francis Bacon was its source. By his assertion, living nature was no longer to be understood as an organism, but as a machine, which modern rational men would perfect. And you can see where that's got us to. In Vandana's words, and I quote from the book, page 21, at the root of our polycrisis is a mechanical, militaristic mind, a monoculture of the mind, which reduces the biodiverse, self-organized, living earth to raw material for the money machine. It's time to recognize the difference between the fake science and false solutions of the 1% and the deep ecological sciences of living systems themselves. I don't know what's happened there. Argument 3, the costs of progress. Vandana, you begin unraveling the metabolic consequences of mechanophilia by observing that the age of oil has totally transformed our food systems. It starts with the adoption of petrofarming. Based on artificial fertilizers, pesticides, and soon enough genetically engineered seed. Not only soil organisms are destroyed by this, but the World Health Organization has already admitted that Monsanto's Roundup herbicide is a probable carcinogen. Another hidden cost of agro-industrial production in the age of oil is plastic, leaching down.
Can I just ask a question? Are you moving paper? Because there's a strange sound coming through.
It might be the paper.
Try not to move the paper over the keyboard. Thank you.
Another hidden cost of the agro-industrial production in the age of oil is plastic, leaching daily into our bodies from packaging. Your economic link between nitrogenous fertilizers and the manufacture of military explosives was a further eye-opener. Argument 4. Actually, there's a quote here which Vandana might read, but since you haven't got the text with you, I'll try it myself. Because I'm not a scientist, and I find getting my tongue around these scientific terms pretty tricky. But you point out to us the deadly cocktail which the artificial strawberry flavour of Burger King's milkshake includes amyl acetate, amibutyrate, amyl valerate, anethol, anisile formate, benzyl acetate, benzyl isobutyrate, butyric acid, and more. My God. No surprise that human health fails under the mastery of nature. Valuable insect species and some 800 million birds have been lost too. And what of the cruelty enacted on animals in the name of research? Argument 4, metabolic disorder. Vandana points out that the Convention on Biodiversity, CBD, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, should have been interconnected from the start. Biosphere and atmosphere are one entity, not separate linear variables, as the mechanistic mind has it. Now, actually, your account of the political sabotage of climate politics over the last several COP meetings is quite invaluable. Would you like to revisit that, Vandana, yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ariel, and thank you, Susan and Renate, for publishing my latest book. It's a book that synthesizes both the basics we learn in physics, issues of entropy, issues of relatedness. In the quantum world, there's nothing like objects to measure. They're relationships that create phenomena. And the climate problem is really a problem of what we call entropy, wasted energy. Energy that becomes useless, and lots of energy used to then become pollution. And this was addressed in 1992 at the Earth Summit, where Ariel was also there and I was also there. The UN framework on climate change was very linked to the Biodiversity Convention, and yet the two went apart. The principles that were adopted at the Earth Summit in 92 included two very important principles. First is the polluter must pay. Simple law. They're creating so much gymnastics, to avoid the polluters paying worse. Right now, the polluters want to control not just the climate problem, but the whole planet's processes, living processes. And the book is a lot about that. The second principle was precautionary. If you don't know the consequences, you must err on the side of not acting, take precaution. And look at the reckless experiments that are being proposed from, geoengineering of the entire planet and trying to block the sun as if the sun was the problem. The big shift in which in the introduction that I talk about is how, since 92 to now, first, nothing moved, and then Copenhagen onwards, it started to unravel. Obama flies in and basically takes the group of polluters who are now the new polluters because the southern countries were not part of the industrial empire. Outsourcing made them industrialize in polluting ways. But whose footprint was it? That has never been worked out. And he flies in and brings the 5 polluters and says, there should not be any legally binding emission reduction. Why don't we just say that we will now make voluntary commitments and we will not have a law? But entire environmental law is meant to be law and legally binding, and not voluntary commitments of polluters. And that's what happened at Copenhagen. And, for Copenhagen, I had written a book called Soil Not Oil, both to create, show the two civilizations, one of the earth and the soil, and the other of oil, really a short 100 years, and 200 years of coal. That's how short everything is. And at that time, I started adding up the issues of on the food system, indirectly, because no one was counting it at that time. And I'd worked out 45% emissions come from an industrial petro-food system, as you call it, a petro-agriculture. But we're eating oil. We're not just growing food with oil. We're eating oil, as you described. And that's why there's so much sickness. In effect, the chronic disease pandemic is really eating oil pandemic. And then you have Paris, and the dominant media talks as if the first time an agreement was made was in Paris. No agreement was made. Voluntary commitments were announced. There was no agreement. The agreement had been killed in Copenhagen. And worst, that is why I wrote Oneness versus the 1% with my son, because I couldn't figure out how does Bill Gates stand on the stage with the heads of state. The UN was supposed to be member countries. The billionaires had no role in it. They would never been elected by any of us. But he was then telling the governments what they should be doing: geoengineering, genetic engineering, more and more trade in pollution. And that's around the same time when Monsanto was being bought by Bayer. So we wrote the Oneness versus 1% about the new shift in the global geopolitics. You see, 95 with the WTO was one. But globalization having created the billionaires and the tech giants by basically them not paying taxes. 2050 with Paris is the beginning of a new phase of ultimate deregulation on the one side, a free hand for the billionaires to do what they want to. But most importantly, totally rewriting the science of ecology, rewriting the democracy of both international systems, one country, one vote, as well as through that hijack, invading and eroding democracy at the grassroots level, and then the creation of false narratives and false solutions, beginning with, and the interesting thing, there was such a mix-up, because I have watched in these, they call them the COPs, the Conference of Parties, the bureaucrats, the heads, the governments are working away on their commas and full stops and their brackets. And meantime, the billionaires fly in, meet on the side, hold a big conference, and everyone is made to believe that that was the negotiation. There was no negotiation. So the negotiations of the UN have disappeared. One country, one vote has disappeared. The dollar dominates. Billionaires dominate, and there's been a hijack. We've talked about in the food chapter, in the fake food chapter, we've talked about the hijack of the food summit. It used to be in Rome, where the FAO is. It was taken to New York and run by Gates, literally run by Gates. Dubai, the head of an oil company, headed the climate discussion, and Gates was there to announce again, And the merger starts between the digital world and the oil world and the world of our life and the planet's life. So, there's climate experience by ordinary people dying. There is climate movements, sometimes very narrow, very, very narrow. Then you have the negotiations still going on and on and on, reaching nowhere. And you have the billionaires running off with the agenda. That's where we are. The earth speaking, people suffering the impacts of the impact of the 1%. And I've cited the Oxfam data that 1% emit more than 2/3 of the pollution of humanity. And yet they're going around in their private jets, telling everyone what they should do, to kill all your cows, finish your farming. For me, the book is important because it's written at a time where the tech industry, Silicon Valley, Bill Gates are saying, we have to have farming without farmers and food without farms, fake food from labs. So there's an entire chapter dedicated to the fake food dystopia. including the science of how it will add to industrial farming. It will add to pollution and emissions. 5 times more land will be needed for the feedstock for the microbes in the lab. 25 times more emissions will be created by the artificial energy that will have to be used to just keep all those systems alive when the sun gives us the free energy, which then through photosynthesis becomes our food. So, I mean, I think it's at this point, everything we've done, Ariel, in ecofeminism, the assumptions of the capitalist patriarchy is beginning with Bacon, the earth is dead, women are stupid. No, neither is true. Women are creative, the earth is creative. And the reason I named it as the metabolic disorder of climate change is to just remind people that A, the earth is living, and it's not a machine that you can tamper with even more, to twist it even more, to do geoengineering, to try and substitute the food cycle, the currency of life, with more and more industrial processes. And this metabolic disorder of the earth, as climate change, has the same roots as the metabolic disorders of chronic diseases that human beings are suffering. It's really bringing life back to the center.
And what I really love about this is your linkage with the water cycle too. As thinking about your first classic, 1989, Staying Alive, where you explained how ecologically responsive farming among peasant cultures is gentle on soil bacteria, and which in turn support the natural evaporative processes of plants. You cite our late friend, geneticist May Wan Ho, I see, on the complex role of the leaf, photosynthesis, which drives the Earth's water cycle while taking carbon from the atmosphere. And the analysis of climate, this analysis of climate, is precisely the opposite of what the fake food makers are saying. And I have a quote here from you, Vandana. I found this on page 55. You say nitrogen fertilizers also emit a greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times. Am I correct? Did I copy this?
Yeah, 300 times.
Destabilizing for the climate system than CO2. 300 times more destabilizing for the climate system than CO2. Chemical agriculture needs 10 times more water to produce the same amount of food than organic farming does. Now, distinct from the logic of the profiteers and the mechanophiles, the key to healing the metabolism of climate is water, the planet's bloodstream. And a relational science, such as you have, recognizes the agency of multiple life processes in steering the Earth's cooling circulation of local and global water cycles. Biosphere and atmosphere are one. So it's very clear your early academic training in quantum science shine through here. Would you like to say a bit more about that for us?
Yeah. So, I got involved in looking at agriculture when Punjab, where the Green Revolution was first imposed. And by the late 70s and 80s, Punjab was a land of violence. 84, the Punjab violence had reached its peak. More than 15,000 people have been killed. Military was sent into the Golden Temple, and then it's unraveled the vicious cycle of violence. And I, those days, was doing a program for the United Nations University. And I said, on conflicts over resources, I said, there's a conflict here, but it's not obvious. And let me look at it. So I did the book on the Green Revolution at that time. And in the process, I realized that even though the narrative of industrial farming is we feed the world, the reality of industrial farming, whether it's called the Green Revolution when introduced to the South, and now the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa as named by Bill Gates, all of them, the purpose is to sell leftover war chemicals.
Mm.
And Borlaug was given a Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, because what he did was take stolen seeds like the Norin wheat of Japan and the Dewanju of rice of Indonesia. He basically, to deal with the fact that synthetic fertilizers have instant uptake and lead to lodging of plants, the plants were made dwarfs, the plants were shrunk. The photosynthesis capacity of plants was reduced in order to be able to deal with the fertilizers. And Borlaug used to say in India, if I was a parliamentarian, every moment I would get up and say, give me fertilizers, give me more fertilizers. And the person to track these days on the fake climate debate is Bill Gates, who in his book on climate change says, in the chapter on the cow, on methane, he says the problem is cows have 4 stomachs. I mean, this is why our work on genetic engineering, Renate, was so important, because this attempt to constantly define women, nature, life as needing to be fixed because we were wrong. Yeah. To say the cows have 4 stomachs, therefore wipe them out. We need a world without animals and livestock, they call it. Animal farming, they call it. But second, the chapter on fertilizer, standing in front of a fertilizer factory and saying, I'm happier than I look. I mean, someone who in 2024, knowing everything we know about synthetic fertilizers, can stand in front of synthetic fertilizers in a climate book and say, I'm happier than I look. It means, A, he doesn't know big source of emission. 2, that is killing the soil. We do studies of this kind in Navdanya. We compare organic soils and chemical soils. I won't bore you with the data. A lot of it is in the book. It just literally kills the soil organisms. And it defines soil as an empty container and makes it empty. Just like when Australia was colonized, the category in legal jurisprudence of terra nullius was created, defining away Aboriginal people as if they are not human. And if only we had stayed alive to the fact that, just like when, Susan, you started this release and you cited the ancestral lands. But the oldest farming civilization of the world is the Australian Aboriginal people. Not in line crops of monocultures, but working with nature to grow the food you need. And part of the reason Captain Cook said, we can colonize this land, is because they haven't disturbed nature, And the idea of Eurocentrism was, you must leave a footprint of destruction to show that you're human. And therefore, the Aboriginal people weren't human because they hadn't left a footprint. The landscape where they farmed looked exactly like a natural landscape, So they'd call them Bushmen. And, when I did the Sydney Opera House lecture, they gave me that fat book, which I read on my flight back, the biggest estate on earth. Yeah. And now the knowledge is coming out. We were so wrong in every assumption. But the idea of chemical farming and the ignorance about synthetic fertilizer, oceans are dying, waterways are dying because 90% fertilizer runs off. You use 10 times more water to dissolve the fertilizer. That's what it's for, not for the plants. They don't need 10 times more water. 90% runs off and then kills all the fish life in waterways and in the ocean. They call dead zones. If you look at maps of the dead zones, they just grown and grown and grown because all the runoff of the farms goes into the oceans. And then the 300 times more harmful greenhouse gas, which nobody talks about. Nobody talks about it. And the most important part that I've learned over it's now 40 years that I've been looking at the food system. And since 92, the legal system around the climate issue, the entire synthetic fertilizer process is the Haber-Bosch process, the original purpose of which was fixing atmospheric nitrogen by burning fossil fuels at high temperatures to make explosives. And that's why there's so many fertilizer bombs in the world. So it's a war chemical. It's a war chemical, and it is perpetuating the war against the soil, the water, the atmosphere, our bodies. Children, they call them blue babies when there's too much fertilizer in the water, nitrates in the water. People suffer. And calculations have been done about how much the impact of that is. So when you talk about fertilizer, my life has been dedicated since 1984, since I watched Punjab and since I watched the Bhopal disaster, to learn about, to practice, to spread and propagate an agriculture that is not violent, an agriculture of peace with the earth. And it turns out, in this process of 40 years, it turns out, A, the women know best. They still remember. And two, they're willing to relearn what they were made to forget. Yeah. And so all our seed keepers now are women. All the Navdanya organic farmers are women. Our latest work is training women to be organic gurus, we call them, to teach other women on how to get rid of this addiction to chemicals. And next year, I'm so fed up of models being used where no one really knows what's happening on the ground. Nobody knows what the nature of an extreme event really is and what it does to people. So our women farmers will be climate watchers. They will actually just measure the rainfall. They'll measure the temperature. The little gadgets, temperatures and rainfall gauges aren't that costly. So they'll become climate communities. So we know what's happening and we will tell you what the impact is. And at the end of it, it has to be the old message of 92, the polluters must pay.
To take you back to the role of Gates Foundation, the COP 2021 in Glasgow, where which he inspired this foundation called UN Food Systems Summit. That's what it was. Mm. And it was even backed by the medical journal, The Lancet. Yeah.
Very sad. I've done a talk for The Lancet, an anti-talk. And when I see what Lancet is doing today, it is unbelievable.
Well, I think it also got into trouble over the COVID narrative, but that's another story. Mm. Gates has got this amazing basket of companies, which the names of these startups in his global alliance for improved nutrition: Mosa Meat, Eat Just Egg, Good Meat Tech, 3 Cubic Foods, Because Animals, Blue Nalu, and Upside Foods. The latter uses biotech to extract and cultivate stem cells in muscle tissue that is then fed into bioreactors to grow fake chicken. Plant-based egg alternatives are also on the menu. Meanwhile, Blue Nalu, in the seafood sector, has lab-made tuna, snapper, and mollusks. Unquote, Vandana Shiva.
First I want to acknowledge my colleagues at the Navdanya International who did all the graphics for this fake food section. And the one of the startups that you missed, which is worthy of the ecofeminists addressing, is Gates has funded something called he's all doing all the lab grown dairy, ice cream, but breast milk as a climate solution. It's bad enough in itself, but then to try and offer it for something of which is the opposite. A baby is at the breast 0 miles. One place making fake breast milk when we know already what the Nestle milk did and that's why the whole baby food movement was created, to now have fake milk, no idea, no testing about what this does to the baby's health, and to ship it around the world as a solution to climate change. I mean, it's really, if Bacon spoke rubbish to say we will make nature our slave, the rubbish of the billionaires who sit around like this and say, when someone asked Gates in an interview on climate change, but people say that trees are good. Trees do photosynthesis, trees absorb carbon. You don't have to have the carbon removal machines with more material extracted, with more fossil fuel used. That's not a solution. When the interviewer said, and people say planting trees is good, and of course it's good, he turns around and says, those are the idiots. We are the science people. Now, I think that is the categorization of idiotic billionaires who would like to turn, once again, the earth into dead matter, turn every living organism, every tree and every cow and every plant and every seed into something to be gotten rid of. And to once again try and define the intelligence of nature, the intelligence of women, the intelligence of ordinary people as idiotic, and their stupidity as the new innovation. And, so it's really Bacon, Descartes come alive with a vengeance in an extremely anti-people, anti-nature thing. And I think the missing piece right now for everyone is, how do we reinvent democracy in these times when idiots rule the world and call us all idiots?
Yes, well, there is a burgeoning movement of eco-masculinity, Shiva, Vandana. Your fingers crossed.
But, I haven't come across it, and I don't know what they're trying to say or do.
You can have a look there. I just did a chapter for the Elgar Encyclopedia of Environmental Thought or something, Environmental Ethics or something. And so I did the ecofeminism chapter. And then, of course, the very next chapter is eco-masculinism or eco-masculinity. Yes, it has a few issues.
One reason I wrote the book is both the work on genetic engineering, everything I learned about the science of living organisms. I've not studied, I haven't had a class in biology. My learning of biology has come from nature, and it's come from friends who are geneticists and biologists, people like Mae Wan Ho, people like Brian Goodwin. I went to them. I said, they're doing genetic engineering. I know basically where the systems level, where things could go wrong, but I don't know the intricacy. So, will you work with us and tell us? So we created a group for post-reductionist biology, where the scientists who knew the real science and the good science provided the knowledge and the activists acted. Because before that, the activists acted and then people would be trashed. But now we have the highest science. And that's how 98 onwards, GMOs did not spread in the most part of the world. And we need something similar right now on every field, on every aspect of our life. But the most important point about the climate and the food debates being hijacked, the UN systems that were meant to protect people and the planet being hijacked to destroy even further what remains and try and make money by pushing the earth to more rapid collapse. That's why I'm heavy on the science of it from the people I've learned, Schrödinger reminding us that living systems are not machines. They have negative entropy. Machines emit pollutions. Life takes the sunlight and the photon and drops on a leaf. And then the electron is excited And within no time, it's 10 to the 23 second, that minus 23 second. That's how quickly it drops back and reorganizes energy. And that's why there's negative entropy, because life generates its own energy. And that's why the issue of generative that you raise again and again, Ariel, that generative systems don't work on external inputs. They don't work on oil. They work on love. They work on their self-organization and autopoiesis. So in terms of how the meeting of independent scientific thinking, the science of living systems, and all the feminist thinking, and all of the intelligence of nature, and all the traditional indigenous knowledges, the convergence, the potential for the convergence is huge. We just need to be more open to it.
Thank you. It's a cultural question. I mean, it's so interesting. We talk about environmental ethics, talk about the need for appraisal of new technologies, but basically we cannot have an ecological ethics without a deeper cultural understanding. And that's the hard one in this society where culture counts for nothing. In fact, a society which is steadily eating its own culture by AI and that kind. Yeah. You, Vandana? AI?
Yeah. Okay. So, if when you think, I always see it in terms of the evolutionary pattern. Yeah. So first, they took the land of the indigenous people and said, this is terra nullius. It's empty land. And then they took synthetic fertilizers made from oil and redefined soil from being a living ecosystem to being an empty container for pouring nitrogen fertilizers into. That's how textbooks define the soil, empty container. And then they took the seed and started to shoot genes for expressing toxics, Roundup resistance, Bt toxin, and started to say empty seed. And I'm not saying this trivially because I have been in legal cases with Monsanto where they would repeatedly try and argue that the seed is empty till we put our chemicals and our genes into it. And then it becomes a Superman. They act like this in the courts. And then we make the seed a Superman. So then that's bio-nullius. And now with artificial intelligence, basically all it does is extract from farmers, extract from us the data. We've been reduced to data mines. And then that is all consolidated in machines. And the machines then, fed with algorithms, process the data. We are reduced to users. Machines become the determinants of value with the algorithms, and then feed back on us what our worth and value is. And I'm not saying this with an exaggeration. At the peak of COVID, Microsoft got a patent. A patent basically says users using machines. We human beings as autonomous thinkers with intelligence of all kinds, emotional intelligence, cooperative intelligence, creative intelligence, compassionate intelligence, we're reduced to users of machines which are more intelligent. And artificial intelligence then is they're preparing a world to make us imagine that they will be the rulers through their machines. But artificial intelligence is just a bad word because all they do is basically train. They call it training. Yeah, they download through our activities and data into a machine, and that training is why they have to have all these data centers. And all of these data centers are the biggest energy consumers today. One data center uses the household energy of 250,000. The data centers of Iceland are using more energy than all of the people of Iceland right now. This is where the big entropy is being created. This is where the new emissions will be created. But they call it dematerialization. That's how they define it. Just like they take more and more energy intensive process like fake food and call it decarbonization. The issue is carbon was not the problem. Life is carbon, the tree is carbon, we are carbon, soil is carbon. Living carbon and fossil carbon are just two different entities. But ontological confusion is what this kind of pretended science is all about. So basically, we have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is the synthesizing hemisphere that has the wisdom, the guidance. It really is what guides us. The left can do analytic. There's a lovely good book called The Emissary and the Prophet and the Emissary. And it's about the right and left brain by a neuroscientist. Very, very good book, Ian McChrist. And he's saying, we have stopped using enough of our right brain, which in fact, is what women use more and more. And the left brain, without the guidance of the right brain, is pushing humanity to the destructive paths. But then parts of the functions of the left brain, which can be downloaded into computers, and it's called, actually the real name is not artificial intelligence. It should be called machine learning. That's all it is. Machines learning a part of a part of a part of what we have the capacity to do. But doing it in such volumes that increase in volume and increase in speed is treated as more differentiated functions, which is not at all. And so, they're creating a narrative of inevitability. But there's no inevitability to it if we become fully aware. And, this patent of Microsoft at the peak of COVID, for users to be their data to be downloaded in the machine fed with algorithms, all its biases, then evaluating us and assigning us cryptocurrency, which will use more data, which will use more data centers. And they're doing this in China already. That if you haven't functioned in the right way, they don't do it with they do it in terms of your place in society. You're a $5 worth person, or you're a $5 million worth person. And I think that is so wrong. All of human rights is a recognition that we are different, we are diverse, but we are equal. And this perversion that diversity is not equality, that thinking that uniformity has to be created and uniform measures have to be created. So that's where they'd like to take us, digital currencies, and tell you you're a $1 person, I'm a $2 person, and I'm a $5, and I don't deserve to exist. Actually talking about 90% people. 99% people, actually. Zuckerberg gave a Harvard lecture, I think it was a convocation lecture. And he said this, he gave a 1% speech. He said 99% people have no place on this earth. They're useless because artificial intelligence and robotics can substitute them all. No, it cannot. It cannot substitute the footless of living beings, of earth beings, of fullness of human beings as part of earth beings. And I think our work is to start, and that's why the book is written, to articulate the fullness of living systems, the fullness of human beings as part of the earth, not trying to escape from the earth, the richness of potential that we have in collaboration with the other to address every nasty problem that has been created. I talk about that, how the climate problem can be addressed by doing what the earth has been doing and working in harmony. That if we do ecological farming without chemicals, we do organic farming, we do regenerative farming, we can, with 10% farms in 10 years, undo the climate harm. You don't need anything more. And then onwards, there will be the climate balance, and the earth has her biosphere regenerated, because that's what really organizes and regulates the atmosphere and the climate. So we have to build back the richness of photosynthesis and the richness of biodiversity as members of that biodiversity. And that we should do anyway, not just because there's a climate problem, because that's a better way to live.
Well, thank you. I'm so pleased you got on to talking about AI, and Janet, thank you for your comment saying that there's an AI companion at the bottom of the screen. Now, I think and I hope you have to turn it on. We do not turn on the AI companion, and we also have a thing at the front of your book that says there's no AI training permitted. On our imprint page, no AI training at all. I don't know if Ritu is doing that yet or not.
No.
In our edition, since we've been doing this since last year, and
Okay.
it's a really important thing. Now, I do just have to, when you were talking about cows, I just have to tell you that one of the two short quotes that we put on the back of our edition is, "The problem is not the cow or other farm animals. The problem is factory farming." I love that. Thank you. It's wonderful. But I think I probably have to hand over to Renata now to do our thank yous.
Oops. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Vandana, I just don't know how you do it. You know, you have been doing it. And every book that you produce is just another gem. And I mean, I just so admire your energy, and you just don't give up. And because, you know, people like Bill Gates and the other billionaires like Soros and all the trans billionaires in the US who put so much money into us all becoming transhumans, and with AI, and that's so good that you just say it's just a machine. I hate it when people say, oh, AI is just becoming so good, it's going to be more clever than us, it's going to, you know, tell us what to do. It's just rubbish. It is a machine. It is an it. It's not a she or a he. It is an it. So I'm so full of admiration, and I'm so for the cows. And I really think that about Bill Gates is about the most horrible stuff he said. I mean, you know, one wants to say really rude things about his farts. I'm sure there are many farts of Bill Gates, and you know, they should be put into bottles and then sold. Anyway, I'm supposed to do thank yous here, so my incredible thank yous to you, Vandana, for all your work in this latest book, and I hope you have seen our edition. It's actually really a beautiful. Well, it's a very strong picture of a dead world and a green world.
Yeah.
And dead world is actually on the left side, because we are already in the dead world. What they're doing so many things. So we can only hope that somehow or other, you and other thinkers, you know, and of course we're all working for it, but still, that we somehow get out of this. I'm not sure actually that we do. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Ariel very much for all the work you have done. The book, the Pluriverse you did, and thank you. And also thank you for doing the really good launch comments on Vandana's book. And then, as I usually always say, that, you know, books don't just make themselves. There's a whole team behind the book. And this team here behind this book is really mostly Ritu Menon's team from Delhi, from Women Unlimited. She's worked with Vandana. I'm sure there were many edits. And what we got was more or less a finished edition. We found a few mistakes, but, you know, that's what we do. And that's really all. But I want to thank our team, Rachel McDermott, who's a very wonderful publicist who's now trying to shop this book around and get anybody to be interested in this book. And Pauline Hobson, our editor, who did find a few typos. Susan, of course, who is at the helm of Spinifex. Without Susan, nothing would happen. Caitlin Roper, who is our social media person over in Perth. And Danielle Osborne, who is our manager, and will hopefully send out lots and lots of copies of your books, because we have lots and lots of copies of your books. And when this video is uploaded to the Spinifex channel, Rachel will actually put on a note saying where the book can be purchased. And if you're not sure, come to Spinifex Press and buy it there. So again, Vandana, I have just so much love for you. I really love you, and I love your sister too. And I just wish we would see one another a bit more in real life, and not like we do too. We are also in this silly computer sphere. But on the other hand, we don't do miles. We are, sitting here. We're not wasting energy on flying around the world. So thank you again. Thank you absolutely everybody for being here. And I really, really hope that loads of people read this book. We need to for our survival and the ones of our children, those of you who have them. And it's really, really crucial that we become very serious, because I think that we are in such a mess. The world is in such a mess. And the billionaires, and Bill Gates is probably one of the worst, but he's not the only one. The billionaires are really trying to do us in with their greed for power. It's power they want, and it's money they want. And I say, good luck to Elon Musk and all the others who want to go to Mars and to Moon. Off with you. Just go there, take yourself, and fly there and leave us to our wonderful Earth, so we can continue to live here without without artificial fertilizer, and enjoy it and be women and animals and have a really good life, as Maria Mies, who sadly departed us, always used to say. We need to remember the good life, as Farida Akhtar from Bangladesh also says. So thank you, and to all of us, and the good life, and good riddance of all the people. Maybe Elon Musk can take Bill Gates with him on one of his shuttles to Mars. That would be good. Don't you think so, Vandana? That would be really a very good ending for Bill Gates.
Yeah. When I wrote the oneness, 6 billionaires were owning half of the wealth of the world. Yeah. And I said, all they need to be put is in a little capsule.
Yes, yeah.
6 of them.
And just off with them.
Little capsule.
Absolutely. immediate riddance.
Just to let you know, there are lots of thank yous in the chat from everybody, from women in a whole lot of different places, and thanking you for your wonderful work, Vandana, and also for the launch this evening. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you.
And have a wonderful day, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.